People talk about the bald buff, where you shave your head and all of a sudden you're better at CS. It's the aerodynamics, I'm not sure, but elige certainly embodies that idea because he is playing some of the best CS he's ever played, really, on what is not the greatest team of all time, Complexity. And the team is okay, but there's certainly not quite what Liquid was back in the day. We'll see exactly what makes elige so good. And I know what you're thinking, Vu, you said the baldest person you've ever seen. Obviously, Grim is far more bald than elige, and you know what? I'm sorry, I just had to clickbait you, okay? I'll probably make the same title, and I'll review a Grim demo. But unfortunately, Grim is no elige. Okay, now if Grim was as good as elige, that'd be... Wait, hold on. Can someone zoom in on this? This circle at the bottom, that's off-center. Why the fuck is that off-center? Is it off-center for everyone? It's off-center. But it's like, it's perfectly on-center in the... That's some bullshit, dude. Someone call Valve. That's some straight bullshit. It's on the circle, it's off-center. Is it for... BetBoom's fine. Is it because it's there... I don't know if maybe the... I don't know. Okay, so this is becoming a super insanely common angle. I'm expecting at some point people are just going to start pre-firing this. Like... Everyone seems to be playing this on Pistol. At this event especially, I've seen 2 people play this on Pistol. I mean, here's the thing. You don't play this with only one player, right? You have JT over here towards, in Zywoo, and so he's drawing the fake a little bit, but it is becoming unbelievably common. Anyways, they cross 4 players. elige sees that. This is the problem, though. This is why I say in other reviews, you do kind of have to clear lobby. That's why they have a player clearing lobby, because the flank is coming in at some point here. And they did have Halzert clearing lobby, but you need to be kind of quiet clearing lobby, because, for example, if Halzert cleared lobby and the guy was back squeaky, if Halzert ran the whole way, then not only could the guy squeaky kill him, but also the guy squeaky could just walk down vents knowing that that player probably called to his teammates that lobby was clear. Or he could re-flank, you know, there's lots of different things. Anyways, now we've got elige with a deagle. Dude, the view model from elige really triggers me. Okay, I think I've said this in a video before. I hate it. By the way, he definitely didn't see this guy. There's a clear difference between what you see in the Go TV or what you see in spectating. That's like maybe like a 1/10 of a second off or a 1/4 of a second off. This is one of those ones where I'm certain he didn't see this player. Anyways, really nice shot onto Magnoyes. I've seen this guy in like 3 different games. I've just avoided saying his name. If you watch back my other demos, I just didn't say his name. I just said this, like I just like pointed him out. I didn't say his name. Someone tell me, Magnojez? Anyways, getting some damage done here is really what the CTs are looking to do. I mean, when you go for a force, Nuke is a good map to force on, not necessarily because you don't need the utility on the first gun run, which you do, but because it's the highest win rate force map. I think Dust 2 maybe is higher, but Nuke has definitely always been really high. And elige does a really good job there just surviving. He gets a lot of damage done, but if you don't have that crossfire, because Floppy got mollied out of position, that's the whole point of that crossfire, or that molly. You know, it's still tough to deal with elige, right? It's not like elige is easier to deal with than Floppy, but if Floppy was alive, then they end up in this crossfire, and elige can do that kind of pot shots and back up and, you know, over and over and over. And then you end up in this situation where, you know, you're just getting sandwiched, right? So this is another... Oh, he's sweet. elige is one of those zoomers, dude. He swaps weapon angle. He swaps weapon hand. That should be illegal, dude. I hate seeing this. I'm gonna watch it again. What do you guys think, by the way? The new M4A1S default skin, it looks way different, right? I hate it. I don't hate it. I actually really like it, okay? I take it back. I really like it, but it looks way different, right? I mentioned this to someone. They were like, that doesn't look any different to me. Anyways, people are loving that angle elige played. You can see it was a little risky because if someone was looking at that exact moment, his feet would have shown up before he saw them, but it would have been a very, very particular timing. Then he's just going to back away. This is generally how you usually see outer plays happen. They'll either back away into lockers. People are loving to play lockers recently. I'm not exactly sure why, but people are loving to play lockers recently. You have to keep in mind, by the way, that angle from Chiron, that's not like an angle where the AK is even accurate. Like, if you actually test out the AK and go to a range like that, the AK is actually pretty inaccurate at that range. It's actually straight up. Hold on. Okay, here's the Chiron angle. If he's standing, I think he was standing there, right? That is highly inaccurate, okay? The AK is just not accurate at that range. The M4, and Elige was crouching, I think is quite accurate. I mean, no gun is perfectly accurate, but the A1S is, you know, you do, I feel like, have an advantage at that range. Although you could argue maybe he has a disadvantage if he plays against people that have shit aim. All right, so next round up, Complexity actually do win that round. And I'm surprised people are still throwing that outer molly. I feel like that outer molly must have a gap now since the molly update. But, oh, it looks like it doesn't. If you throw it correctly, it doesn't have a gap. It definitely doesn't delay them nearly as effectively as it did before. And that used to help a lot. It would prevent people crossing to red if you were going to peek T red. It just made life a lot easier as a CT by throwing that molly early. And there's not a lot of places you can throw your molly anyways, right? Like as an outer player, where else are you really going to throw your molly except like top secret if they molly cross or if you go down vents. But anyways, Elige is playing the off angle here because Mini is smoked off, and there's not a ton of angles that you can really be worried about when Mini's smoked off there as Chiron. So Chiron is going to be walking up here, and this is the main... People have been loving this angle so much recently. So he looks to clear it, and Elige gets the perfect timing where Chiron just starts to look away, but he's still visible, and gets the kill. It's a nice little play from Elige. You wouldn't... listen, if you're playing at a pug, I'm going to tell you, the odds of them looking at you are probably lower than the odds of them walking directly into Mini. So I probably wouldn't be playing quite... Maybe you could be like jiggling it, like just peeking in and out a little bit, delay re-peeking. Regardless, at this level, really nice play from Elige. People are just so ready for that. But Elige does pick up a kit, and Siren clearly hears him pick up a kit. Which is just funny, because Siren was not looking at that, and then Elige is like walking, he's trying not to make noise, he's clearing things like methodically, and Siren's like, hold up, wait a second, I just heard that shit, dog. Alright, so flash high, then the nade. If you are throwing that nade, if you're the typical outer player, the only thing I would give as a suggestion if you play outer is to vary up the timing and the position, or at least one or the other of that nade. Typically, I find that most people that throw that outer nade either throw it instantly whenever they throw it, which means I can just wait half a second and I'll be fine, or they throw it in the same position every round, usually at the same time also. But there's like 3 or 4 different spots you can throw that nade at that are all really strong, and you have, you know, to some extent you can throw it a little bit later. You got to be careful on the timing, you don't want to wait too long, but you can throw it, you know, in like a 4-second kind of window, and then people will be much more scared to go outer, and they'll wait quite a while to avoid that nade. Here, they're just fighting a deagle. Really doesn't matter. Bet Boom is a really solid team, I feel like. Nafany, I don't know. They've had ups and downs, to be fair. Initially, I remember thinking, wow, it's like Nafany's kind of proved himself on a different roster, but then they had some pretty clear downs right afterwards. Complexity playing pretty heavy on outer. Halzerk's playing there with the op. Halzerk's been there with the op a couple of times, and this allows Elige to get aggressive here. And although he technically could have been heard from the player in Squeaky, he only made a few steps, so it's fairly unlikely he was heard, since this is on LAN. I feel like online, even online with that much stuff going around you're not necessarily expecting it. But you can actually see Magnoia's, he's already hunting. He's already hunting this early in the round, but Complexity's actually going for it. And I think a decent amount of clutches I've seen recently actually end up going really weirdly because of situations like that, where teams are hunting super early, expecting that the CTs are going to be saving, but the CTs are actually going for it for whatever reason, right? And then it actually ends up in these really weird clutch situations. Now, keep in mind though, one of the things to note is that you can kind of get an idea that Elige was probably playing close-up outer by the fact that he flanked. If he was playing garage, is he really flanking there? Now, Elige did delay the flank quite a bit. The flank was very late, so he could have been playing somewhere like T-red, but that does factor into the way he's going to play the following round, is if his opponents knew he was in a position or not. And one of the reasons that you can kind of end up, outplaying yourself when you try and outplay people is because then you're thinking, well, if they know that I played there, this guy requested a Red Bull? Lol, we couldn't find any available couriers nearby? Lol? That must be easy joking, because I know the ESL brought, so whatever you see in ESL demo, I think it's ESL demos, some form of demos, I think it's ESL, they always open and they're like, you can type .request and anything and we'll bring it for you, right? I guess they have couriers, like people that do that shit for you. But wouldn't expect Compass Yala or whatever it's called to have that. Anyways, in this round, elige, just pretty standard situation. He starts Heaven, so they've been playing, again, very heavy on outer. They're still going to have Halzerk outer, but elige has the M4, so elige is going to play in a rotation position, which is Heaven, and he's going to be able to make his way over. They actually have 2 people trying to rotate, and this round actually could have looked quite a bit different if elige just hit the shot, you know? That's a shot elige probably generally hits on that angle, by the way. That angle his opponent played, by the way, sick fucking angle. This angle is so sick. I've gotten so many kills at this angle. It's insane. So, is it Nafny that does it? You jump on this rail and you play the counter headshot angle. This angle is just so strong. It's just so strong. Nobody really pre-aims it generally, in my experience. It's rare to see it pre-aimed. You have a huge advantage on the guy coming out of RAM. You're not yet vulnerable to the guy that drops. So, you know, the rotate elige is kind of looking either for players that are jumping over the ledge to drop down or swinging on the ramp, or he's like swinging out to kill people running up on his close left, right? Those are the kind of the angles you're expecting. You're generally not expecting a guy to jump on that railing and fight you from the headshot, but you have to be very careful in the timing, because if you're a little too late, then you end up actually just getting yourself fucked. You end up just getting killed in the air or something, or you can't, because you have to kind of move straight forward to get to the perfect angle, so you end up in this really awkward spot if you're not fast enough. So this time, Halzerk is the one that goes aggressive with the op. This is the 3rd time they've tried to play close outer. Unfortunately for Complexity, this is the round they go outer, and Halzerk doesn't hit the shot. But elige does immediately turn it around by accepting that aim duel on the player on top of boxes, which is kind of what you're looking for. Especially when you lose a player, well, the easiest way to get that advantage back is to immediately fight the following player before they actually adjust their game plan. Because usually it takes a couple of seconds to get out of your current game plan in general, to accept that you have like an advantage and you know you're taking risks. I don't think that's necessarily an angle that he wouldn't be taking otherwise, like even if he knew, because an op out there, once you've already killed the opper, you can feel fairly comfortable on the other engagements you're taking. But certainly in general, the faster you try and get that trade, the better to catch them before they adjust things. But elige, what I wanted to back up here for is because elige has so much movement, right? So if we just look at what he does here, you know, Halzerk's gonna die. He mollies top secret. Then he goes for the peek here. Gets the kill, backs up, and he doesn't stay static. He backs all the way around, and he could peek out red, or credit card there, but that's such an obvious peek. You can see Magnayez was completely ready for that peek. Now, he could go back Heaven, and that would be a really reasonable move, because if he goes back Heaven, he allows a little bit more mobility for his teammates to potentially rotate off, right? If he goes Heaven, Grim could drop in a sight, JT could go down vents, and then you have another really solid hold. But you can also just make a bit of a gamble, and that's perfectly fine. So JT and Mini, he's not really vulnerable unless they walk directly out Squeaky, but there's a smoke there. Grim is on rafters. He's still in a good spot to stop Hut, and he can pivot outer as well if more stuff goes on outer. So elige kind of pivots into, it's more of a, this is a feeling it position, I feel like. You pivot into this because you know that you're going to be able to win the gunfights on the player outer, and you know that there's almost certainly at least one more player outer that's going to end up trying to either, you can flank them if they go down secret, or you can fight them, you can kill them if they try and go mini. And yeah, he's just so active. He's almost feels like a bit like an opper in that way, where oppers always love taking shots and then backing up and moving around. I think when you look at really star players that are just feeling it in certain games, like Donk, you know, or even players like Twist, Naf, Nico, like star riflers, they will be very mobile throughout the map, just to ensure that they can get slightly advantageous engagements. And if you're feeling it, if you're playing well, you can, you know, try and prioritize those. So this time, he's just changing up the positioning over and over and over, right? He's not letting his opponents get a good read on how he's playing or where he's playing, which is just generally what you want to be doing. If your opponents, if you look back at like 2014, 2015 CS, you would see teams that would just run the same CT setup over and over. And I remember calling back in those days because it was like, oh, we figured out what their setup is. And it would just be kind of like a flow chart. Like as the round went on, they might move, but they would still set up in the same setup most of the time. Whereas as time has gone on, teams have realized, if they don't know our setup, it's going to be a lot harder for them to counter it. And then you're playing kind of a percentage thing. So, sometimes people understate how much randomness, I don't know if I like the word randomness for this, but randomness there is in Pro CS, because sometimes you just run a setup and, maybe you run a setup. You could imagine a situation where you run a setup 9 out of 10 rounds, and then one round you just don't run it, not for any good reason, but that's the round that your opponents would have killed you for running that setup, right? You have to be a little bit, you have to accept that that's reality sometimes, but all I'm saying here is that rotating around different setups is generally a pretty good idea, and it's going to make it hard for your opponents to... If your opponents don't know what you're doing, then... If you don't know what you're doing, how are your opponents supposed to know what you're doing? No, listen, the point I'm trying to get across here is that it's important that your opponents have to be worried about every possibility, because then they have to play as if every possibility is happening this round, and they're going to leave gaps, and they're going to waste utility, and they're going to waste time. Now, elige had a pretty quick rotate down to lower here. It would have been really great if he had enough utility, but they just didn't have the money, so I don't think he had a molly, because what I would have wanted him to be doing here, he loves to throw the glaive smoke. I don't know. I feel like some teams love throwing the glaive smoke. Other teams throw the glaive smoke. The glaive smoke, by the way, is that smoke between Mini and T-Red. That's what people call the glaive smoke, or at least in NA. Generally, I see it called the glaive smoke or the Astralis smoke. Some teams love throwing it, some teams don't. I feel like in, new CS, I feel like I prefer not throwing it, because it would have been really nice. I mean, there's many reasons for, it's nice to have a smoke, but in this round specifically, it would have been really, really nice if elige had a smoke, because he could have dropped down lower into vents, and then he could have been jiggling with the smoke out, right? And that would have really put the kibosh, essentially, on any plans, on the plan that BetBoom had in this round. But again, elige... I think the key, this is something you'll see with good players, they know when to disengage from a fight. I think good players will just peek back up and they'll go back for this fight a lot of the time. Great players are willing, I said this in the Blame F demo, which, I don't know if it's going to come out before or after this, but they're going to take gunfights that they know that they have a good advantage in. And elige certainly could have popped back up, but I think popping back up the fight again almost shows a lack of confidence, because you're saying, if we reset, I'm not going to be able to get into a situation where I have a better chance of killing you than a 1v2 where you're looking right at me. Really? You're right? If you think you're a great player, you should be able to... You should have some level of confidence that you can get out of that, get back into the back of sight, and even though, it's not the perfect situation, you can still give yourself a better gunfight than that and keep yourself alive into the round to, fight another day. And he did. He got himself another kill. Unfortunately, his team didn't get themselves more than, a few more kills. But regardless, elige now ends up pushing, being the Mini player and playing inside of Mini. That's unfortunate. So I really like, actually, by the way, that Complexity are kind of rotating between Halzerk and elige outer. Sometimes it's Halzerk, sometimes it's elige. I really feel like that makes it harder to read exactly how a player is going to play. That can mess with your comfort a little bit if you're doing that too much. For example, some teams used to play spawn-based on Dust 2, like fully spawn-based, but then it messes with your, is your B site hold going to be as good? Even though it's, harder to read, is it going to be as good as it could be? But this is interesting because I think the Molly fire probably just prevents him from getting that kill. I don't know. Nobody talks about the Molly flame or the nade smoke and all this other stuff that I'm like, dude, when Mollies bloom, it's like, it's invisible. You can't see through it for like a full second and a half, and nobody complains about this. I feel like I'm high on crack, dude. It's like, why is nobody complaining about this? This is clearly a fucking problem. Nobody's complaining about it. All right, so elige is clearly, we're going to call that baiting. Not in a bad way. Baiting gets a bad rap, okay? Baiting gets a bad rap. But he is letting his teammates go out in front of him, but he is taking a fight against someone on an angle where he should generally be able to get the kill. And also, he's your star player. You want him to be you want him probably taking the gunfights where he has the best chance of taking a real fight, right? You don't want to be putting him in situations where he's forcing things and he ends up getting shot kind of in the side or whatever, right? Or he gets shot while he's running out. You want to let players like elige, because he's the most likely to win a gunfight where he has a 50-50 fight, right? So just in general, you want to let that player be elige. Baiting definitely gets a bad rap, but I don't know if there's a better way to describe it, right? Like, playing the trade fragger is also baiting, right? Like, there's plenty of good reasons to be baiting. In this case, so there's kind of lines that you want to be looking at, lines where you go from good engagements to bad ones. So up until like here, these are solid engagements. So up until like, yeah, I think like right about here, these are solid engagements that you can realistically win. You can win the gunfight here. You can win the gunfight even here potentially. You can potentially win the gunfight here. You can potentially win the gunfight here. So you lead with the deagle up until there. And this is the only thing about that pistol round that I would have changed is if elige was planning on not running out. I do wish on their pistol round they had elige with a P250. Maybe it just didn't work with the utility and the money situation, but it would have been nice to see him with a P250 because then he could have killed the player at the headshot angle and pivoted to fight the player J with a much better chance of actually winning that fight as opposed to fighting him with a Glock. So if he's not going to run out, I kind of wish he had a P250. But anyways, with a deagle, it makes sense for him to take those initial fights where there's a good chance of him winning those fights, and then to allow the Glocks to run out ahead of him on the other fights, and then he can get the trade. So basically, that round was like almost carbon copy of the pistol round. Very, very similar situation. But here, he ended up just getting lit down. He just didn't get a kill, and he just gets lit up right down to 18 health. And so one of the reasons that it's nice, even if you only have, one player, two players out, or usually you have a guy cross, it's just so advantageous in the late round to have a player in secret. This player in secret is doing so much. He's preventing rotates. He's causing his opponents who only have 4 players. And Nuke is a map really that 4 players is simply not enough. There's going to be an opening. And so you're going to be able to find openings so well when you have this player in towards secret. Now, the only problem is every player on complexity right now is lit. That makes this a very uncomfortable situation. But that's a fucking huge kill for elige. Now, the problem is Magnoyez was flanking earlier than they expected. Because he was getting aggressive, looking to take some control back, because if you look at the CTs, they simply don't have control of everything right now. So the timing that elige is expecting this flank to come in is in a few seconds. Probably in about 4 to 5 seconds you would expect this flank to come in if the player was playing safe in hell or heaven, right? But they're so preoccupied by the rotate because the CTs are fast rotating. It does buy a little bit of time for Magnoyez to get into position, and because he was getting aggressive at the right time, it was kind of like the perfect time too, because if he had been aggressive a couple of seconds earlier, maybe elige gets that kill. Although, the reason that aggression is not a bad idea is because even if he does get spotted by elige, he also gets that information, so the rotate starts to come in potentially earlier as well if he doesn't, if no kill goes either way. So now elige, he's the silo player, and silo players very, very common in CS2. Now, certain teams like to drop on top of mini more or less. Personally, I feel like I'm not in love with dropping on top of mini, but if you look at teams that have like a clear star rifler, I think those tend to be teams that like to drop on top of mini a little bit more than teams that are a little bit more balanced. Like, I would expect a team like Vitality, maybe. I think Vitality they love dropping flames on top of mini. Vitality, I think, is a team that drops on top of mini. I would expect, like, if I'm guessing, If I'm guessing, I would expect Eternal Fire might be a team that would drop on top of mini, right? But other teams, I'm thinking they, might not want to be dropping on top of mini. There's no reason you can't do it in other scenarios, but it seems like teams that have I mean, Vitality I almost used as an example of a team that wouldn't want to be dropping on top of Mini, but I think they do like it. But certain teams like it a lot more than others. I'm not personally a huge fan. It does feel like, you know, it draws an opportunity for elige to get work done. That's why I think it makes a lot of sense for elige to do it. However, at the same time, it also opens an opportunity for elige to just randomly die in a situation where you really need him to be alive, right? So there's nothing bad with it, but it does end up being a little bit awkward. By the way, you can tell elige is looking on the right here, but there's a gap on the hut angle on the left, and he's probably slightly paying attention to that while looking on the right, because on the left, if you're not an opper, you're not killing him there, right? So he's just going to be able to get the information and not get shot in the side. So then the pivot into upper, this is Overwatch. I don't know necessarily what everyone calls it, but if you say elige is playing Overwatch, that's a great, people should be able to understand what you're talking about here. And this is usually where you might play with an opper, or you might play here with an SG, right? Like back in the SG meta, this is definitely where you'd put your SG. The point being, he's covering heaven. He can pivot to swing to clear out something like rafters if he needs to. And he's going to be able to help if they come up vents and if they come through mini. So that's where you typically would be putting your star player as well. I mean, if you compare this to when I was looking at Stewie 2K, right? Stewie 2K was never put in positions like that. And you have to keep in mind, roles in that regard do end up mattering a little bit, because elige is definitely given the opportunity to get kills more so than the players that are running in first. But it's not for no reason, guys, right? Like, if elige, you know, if Stewie had insane aim and he was just one-tapping everyone, they're not going to be putting him in spots where he can't, you know, do that, right? They're not going to be having him run in on pistol run, looking down, jumping backwards so that he's just bait, right? It's not for no reason that people are put in the situations they're put in. Generally, teams will try out most of their players in many different positions in strats, at least in like execs, right? They'll try out a different player playing Overwatch sometimes, and you know, maybe by necessity, but maybe by, you know, like given the like when rounds break down or whatever, but maybe by like trial and error to see if it works. And if it works, they'll stick with it. It's not like an accident. By the way, I just noticed elige has the same knife I have. It's a good knife. And people hate on the skeleton knife though. It's fucking crazy. People hate on the skeleton knife, but I think it looks so nice, dude. Someone gave me a skeleton knife fade one time, and it was like the cleanest knife I've ever seen in my entire life. Skeleton knife fade, holy fuck, that was so clean. So vent drop. What's Nafany looking at? Nafany is okay. He's just right in front of the vent, so he's basically just playing anti-flash here, probably hoping, or he tried to go down the vents. No, he's just playing anti-flash, so we can come back around the smoke right afterwards. That's really cool. Floppy's ready for that, but in theory, Siren, the timing was just off. And when I say off, guys, I don't always mean wrong. The timing was just not right for them to get the kill. Not perfect for them to get the kill at the right time. That doesn't mean it was wrong. That just means it just wasn't right. It doesn't mean it was a mistake. It just means it wasn't, like, you know, the timing sometimes just doesn't fucking work out, you know? Ever seen a rom-com? Man, sometimes the timing is just not, it doesn't work out. That doesn't mean anyone's wrong. Doesn't mean mistakes were made. Although sometimes I imply it. And sometimes I try and pretend that mistakes weren't made, because I don't want to be, you know, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. I try and pretend like I didn't say something. Anyway, okay. Oh, dear God, elige is fucking insane in this game, dude. Elige is so good, dude. It's crazy. By the way, elige, one of the only players that has an aim coach. I believe elige and Stiko both have aim coaches. Elige has talked about this on the Talking Counter podcast, I believe he went on, where he talked about what an aim coach can actually do. And I want to say, for the record, I don't recommend aim trainers for the vast majority of... Dude, imagine being elige right now. Imagine being elige, and you just hit a fucking jump tech 9, and you just fucking... That round happens, and Magnolia just comes in and fucking retakes like that. Imagine when they know where he is, too. Oh, God, dude. Was that their smoke? There's no way. That must have been Magnolia's. Okay, he picked up a smoke off a dead body, because for some reason someone jumped into fucking Mini. No, that's a CT dead body. Okay, I don't know. Wait, no. Did someone jump in a Mini? It's a T smoke? I don't know. Okay, so they know he's there. The problem is Magnus could go anywhere, and how do you play against that? Maybe, arguably, you could literally just double up. I think that is actually would be a fair play, where you just double up. Halsberg just walks back to site. There's some risk, because the guy could come around the site, but he could be supported from a player here, looking here, and Halsberg just backs up into the site, and they play double in sight. Magnus would never in a million years expect that, unless he caught them as they were doing it, but he wouldn't be able to catch them as they were doing it, because they'd both be staring at the exact same spot while it was happening. But that's a wild play to have made. Like, most of the time, players are just going to expect that, you know, they're just going to feel like they can just win certain situations, you know? They want to put themselves in good gunfights. And if in a 2v1, if you put both of your players in really good gunfights, that's almost always going to work out for you. And then you don't put yourself in the situation where your players are taking uncomfortable duels and you have to worry about it. You know, you have to, like, players are, like, going to feel like, oh, I didn't even have a chance on that because of the way we played it. Players are going to feel like, you know, they're like being micromanaged or whatever because they just want to play comfort. And you have to, I think to some extent, you have to realize that players are players first, right? You want to make them feel, if you're coaching, you want to make them feel comfortable and make them feel like they're, you know, I don't know, what the fuck am I talking about, dude? I'm talking about, like, these abstract coaching concepts, like, what am I talking about, dude? Why am I talking about this? Like, I remember talking to, like, oppers, where they'll get a 4K and then re-peak for the 5th kill, and it's like, yeah, okay, technically, yeah, you don't want to do that, sure, yeah, for sure, you don't want to do that, you know, in this situation, but it's, like, if I tell you not to do that and you stop doing it, you're just not going to be the same player, right? I don't know, dude. Like, for example, the EG. If you guys remember the NRG, the device versus NRG clutch, where he 1v3s on train, where it's technically not even possible for device to have won that 1v3 if it wasn't for NRG pushing with pistols. Like, they didn't need to push; the bomb would have just exploded. There's so many clutches like that where it's like, yeah, that's a clear mistake, but that's just how players play. You know, they see an opportunity. 99% of the time, they just close out the round. They're just going to do it. Anyways, just to end one thing, unless you're like face at 10 plus, you will get 100,000 trillion billion million times more benefit just playing the fucking game than an aim trainer. I've seen people literally in silver that are like grinding aim trainers that are like super high level at aim trainers. And it's like, dude, yeah, the fucking problem isn't that your aim isn't good. The problem is that you suck at Counter-Strike, okay? So if you want to get better at Counter-Strike, don't train your aim, train your fucking Counter-Strike abilities, okay? Now, elige, a professional player, his Counter-Strike abilities are pretty fucking good, right? But you know what could always be better is your aim, because it's got no fucking skill cap, okay? So that's when you want aim trainers, when you're high level. Don't do aim trainers if you're bad or you're not a mate. Like, even at a high level, even if you're level 10, even if you're like past level 10, you can still probably get more out of playing Counter-Strike than aim trainers. But that's where, you know, fuck it. You know, you can try an aim trainer if you feel like you want it. Go for it, okay? Anyways, Stiko's got a pretty good channel, by the way, but you know what's even better is if you want your own demo review where I talk about specifically the gameplay and not random bullshit, subscribe to my Patreon, because not a single person has subbed to my Patreon since I've been making these videos, and these videos take a lot of fucking time, you know?